try and get round the garden most of the times looking at various things, but last time I did a little bit about the use of DryBuild techniques and foundations and so on. There's a couple of other points that I need to make that perhaps are important. It's very important when you're digging down, particularly under a foundation for a building, that the depth that you go to with the first block is below the level you're going to get the deepest frost down to. I have this method of getting down below the frost line. Now that varies from different parts of the country. In certain parts of the Midlands and so on, the deepest frost might go down as much as 100 millimetres, that's 4 inches in old money. But round here in the west and close to the sea, really about 2.5 to 3 inches is deep enough. That's something in the region of 60, 70 millimetres is deep enough as long as you're going down to the firm soil. Once you've got a rough level, you can refirm the soil by what we call walking. That's walking up and down with the weight on your heels. You've probably seen landscapers doing that type of method. That is solidifying the ground, firming it all up. You walk it, you rake it level, you walk it, you rake it level again. You might do this 3 or 4 times to get the levels right. If you can't get a little bit of loose soil on the top, partly because of deep clay or thick clay, stones, if the ground is very stony, then use some sharp sand which you can get from the builders merchants and put about 50, maybe 70 millimetres of sharp sand in the bottom of your trench. That will give good drainage underneath the bottom block. You put the block down onto it, get it nice and level. Once you've got that level, you can then build up. I've showed this fork before. This is the one I use for what I call the long-term permanent weeds. Very, very strong. It used to be 4 prongs, but because I use it for a special purpose, I took the 2 outer prongs off. And I'll show you in a minute why it's particularly useful. But the big benefit of this is it can go right down much deeper than most roots go. So deep-rooted plants such as docks, some dandelions, some nettle roots and so on, but particularly docks, need to have a really big, long and very, very strong 2-pronged approach in order to get them out. After you've taken out the harvest, the next job is to remove those really deep-rooted things. Here we've got a big old dock plant which has got ahead of itself. Put the fork in a few centimetres away and have it upright. Press really firmly and that'll go right down like that. And then its fork is strong enough to lever the ground in that one spot. As you lever it up, get hold of all the plant's leaves and stems, wiggle the fork like that, wiggle the plant, and then you've got the whole root out. Big docks like this sometimes have a root twice as big as this, and a fork as strong as this one is the only way to get right down underneath to get all those roots out. Because as the winter draws in, what we need to do next after we've removed these permanent long-term weeds is to spread compost about 5-7 centimetres deep across the entire bed. For that I use a different tool. Having removed those long-term weeds like the docks, dandelions, nettles, etc., the next job is to spread compost and then cover the bed. It's very important to realise, especially in the western half of the UK, that the beds need to be covered during the winter. Some people do that by actually sowing seeds called a green manure crop. Those then will be a plant of some sort, and there are different types available which you can sow at this time of the year, and that helps a certain amount to retain the nutrients in the beds. But in the western half of the UK, the high levels of rainfall coming in the autumn will wash out most of the plant nutrients from the ground. Now that's a huge loss, so it's important to cover the ground up. You can ignore various small weeds that are called the annual weeds, and little bits of grass can be put because this ground is going to be covered over the whole winter. The first thing, I use a little cultivator like this. The first thing is to use this and spread the compost across the bed. Different tools can be used for this job. You can use a fork, you can use various things, but I find this the quickest and simplest. Once you've got about 50 to 75 millimetres, that's 2 to 3 inches of compost across the bed, then you can cover the bed up. Now a cultivator like this is a very useful tool for all sorts of things, especially in the spring when you're trying to get a tilth on the top of the soil, but it's also very useful for this type of thing. A big rake actually has its advantages, but it doesn't pull the compost around as well as a tool like this. So after I've used this tool, I then cover this over. As I said, I ignore all one or two little annual weeds. They're no problem at all. Now covering the beds like this can be done just as successfully with cardboard. Part of what we're beginning to call a green lifestyle is the way in which you move around the world, and in fact not the world itself, but the way in which you move around at all. We all have a way of wanting to go somewhere. We all have a way of wanting to get out of the house. It's a natural thing, it's part of our makeup, because as walkers, as gatherers, we used to go round, and for hundreds and thousands of years, even millions of years, we have moved around and walked around to find our food. Part of that desire to move around is the way in which we do it, because that can have a huge effect on the whole of a green lifestyle, and particularly in relation to climate change. I've got a little poem here. I'll read some of it out. And at the moment I'm in our top garden, and it's a lovely afternoon. All of a sudden the sun has come out, and believe it or not, it stopped raining. But the way to look at travel is simple as this. Local life is full of joy. Using pounds you then employ. Keeping jobs so close to home, youngsters work. No need to moan. Walking, scooting, bike or bus, causing no harm, no fuss. Stay close, no need to cuss, and good for all of us. I'm not a terrific lover of solar panels on roofs, if that can be avoided, and I accept that a lot of people have no other space to put them. But solar panels are a sophisticated and fairly expensive way of using solar energy. Behind me you can see our solar panel array making electricity. Right now, even on a cloudy day like this system is probably making about 500 watts at the moment, and it goes up to 2.5 kilowatts when the sun is out shining brightly. This is a system just built on 4 great big posts, not of course right into the ground. They're in fittings which are galvanized, and so that the posts themselves don't go into the ground. But the space is still usable and still part of the garden. So we actually grow things underneath our solar panels. We will look into solar quite a bit more, but we will deal first, the next time perhaps, with the very simple methods of using solar energy to do all sorts of very useful things. Electricity is certainly an important thing and a very important part of the future, but there are lots of other ways to use solar energy, direct for heating, etc., and a lot of them are a lot cheaper and simpler and more reliable perhaps than making electricity first. We will look at that in a future programme. Bye for now. Just picked these up. Corn on the cob, sweet corn, call it what you like. I think that's probably the biggest one I have ever grown, and probably the biggest one I've ever seen. That'll be really tasty.